It was strange how much my feelings for Betty shifted when she was no longer visibly in my sight. She had been a constant in my life since the beginning of the spring semester, although it felt as if I had known her for an eternity. I had found Betty to be absolutely intoxicating, a rare gem in an otherwise dull sea of faces. The way that she smiled at me and the way that she gazed into my eyes was absolutely tantalizing. Her eyes were the ocean, calm in times of peace, and a tempest when she was angry. Her waves crashed all over me, and I was powerless in her wake. Being with Betty was akin to indulging in my greatest desires over and over again. She was my reason to be, my sole reason to live. I breathed in her perfume as if it were the oxygen that I needed in order to survive. And when she was gone, it was as if I had no willpower of my own. The longer that I dated her, and the longer that I got wrapped up in her scent, the deeper my obsession for her grew. Whenever she took her time to respond to my text, I would feel a sense of madness rush over me. I often found myself worrying about what she was doing, if she was okay, and if she would break up with me. For me, it was more than a want to be around her. It was a sort of pitiful need. I was irrevocably hers, and I needed frequent doses in order to survive. It didn't take long before my desperate desire grew to a point where I began to stalk her. The first time that she caught me, I was able to pass it off as a cute, random happenstance. However, it was impossible for me to fabricate a convincing reason for why I was parked outside of her home at 10 p.m. She broke up with me because of it, but for me, there was no moving on. I continued tracking her like a skilled beast tracking its prey. Much to my delight, she kept primarily to her small circle of friends after we broke up and refused any guy that asked her to the prom. When I found out that she was going to the prom with friends, I opted to buy a ticket as well, just for a chance to win her back. Betty knew that I hated crowds, and I wondered if she would find it heroic that I decided to come to the dance after all. I had it planned that I would keep my distance from her, and if her favorite song came on, then I would come and ask her to dance. My jaw practically dropped to the floor when I saw her. She was stunning that night in a turquoise dress that fit her like a glove. I kept my distance, as I had planned, and watched her patiently from afar as I tried my best to blend in with a crowd of other people who thought that they were too cool to dance. It was hard to keep track of Betty when she began dancing, and after a while, I had to cave and ask someone to dance so that I could get a better look. I saw Jules standing by herself, and I asked if she wanted to dance. She seemed delighted, but I had no intention of continuing the evening with her. When Betty's favorite song eventually came on, I excused myself from Jules and began to make my way to where Betty was standing with her friends. She was looking for someone, and my heart pounded swiftly against me as I called out to her. My voice, however, was lost to her as Tyler made his approach. I watched in horror as he caught her attention, and she smiled at him in the way that she used to smile at me. My face was a sure look of bitter disappointment as I quickly left the gym. I went home and scoured social media to get a sense of what Betty could possibly see in Tyler, but there was nothing that I could find that made him particularly special. There was no reason that a guy like Tyler should even be looking at Betty, let alone be allowed to touch her or be anywhere near her. My territorial sense of unease ate at me until I could no longer sit idle. Something had to be done to quell my anger and to make her mine once again. Tyler lived close to the school, and he would often walk home after. From Facebook, I knew that he was a theater kid and that he stayed at the school for practice of a Midsummer's Night's Dream. I waited patiently for the moment when the moon was full and the opportunity for stealth in the moonlight seemed at its most ideal. He never saw it coming, what I did next, as from seemingly out of nowhere, I began making purposeful, scathing marks upon his skin. I could have killed him, but instead, I decided to teach him a lesson. I ripped and teared at his arms until his fingers were crushed and his arms were mutilated and twisted in a sickening fashion. It would be a long time before he was able to touch anyone again without feeling excruciating pain, let alone Betty. The rumor started by Ines about the attack seemed so improbable to the point of being flatly ludicrous that no one believed her. She said that she had visited Tyler in the hospital and that he told her that he had been attacked by some sort of wild animal with human-like characteristics. If anyone other than Ines would have made the claim, then the rumors may have seemed less far-fetched. But luckily for me, she had a tendency to believe in the supernatural and other cryptids. It wasn't as if I was actually worried that I would be traced back to the attack, but it was reassuring to know that no one believed the truth behind it. What was surprising was that it took minimal effort on my behalf to win back Betty's attention. I called her one day after the attack under the guise of pretending that I wanted to check in on her. She told me that she felt terrible about it, that some sick part of her was actually relieved that he had been attacked. She said that he had treated her poorly and that she was happy to finally have him out of her life. I hadn't the slightest idea what she was talking about, and it didn't matter. Whatever it was that had caused her ire had worked beautifully in my favor. Betty was back in my life, and she was more affectionate than ever. She was quick to respond this time around, and she seemed more eager to push her previous sexual boundaries with me, claiming that I made her feel safe, and she wanted it to be me when she was finally ready, and that it really turned her on to think about how territorial I was of her. My mom was gone in the evenings often with her job, and she would often sneak out of her house to stay the night at mine. Between the bed sheets, I promised her my devotion, and I felt like the luckiest person alive to be desired by her. The news that she was leaving for the summer nearly left me speechless. She laughed when I pleaded to go with her and promised that she would be back soon. She promised to call me often, and she made me promise not to kiss anyone else while she was gone. It was impossible to say no to her, and I had no desire to be with anyone else. I swore my devotion to her once again. "You're like a devoted pup," she laughed as I teasingly nibbled at her ear and let out a soft howl for her amusement. When she left, I found her old cardigan in my bedroom, and I would often bring it to my face in an attempt to breathe her in like a memory quickly fading. I spent the first week without her in a miserable state, but by the second week, I was ready to go outside and be back in the sun. I smelled her perfume-scented cardigan and placed it back on my bed before grabbing my skateboard. Not sure of where I wanted to go, I thought of Betty and began skating towards her house out of habit. But before I even made it halfway, I was stopped by Jules. She pulled up beside me in her dark tinted car, rolled down her window, and told me to get in. I had never really looked at Jules before, and I felt an unexpected nervous rush of excitement flood over me like a figment of my worst intentions. Jules was a perfect distraction to my obsessive devotion to Betty, and it did not take long before we were spending our days together, and eventually our nights. It wasn't as if I didn't think about Betty, but my desire for her had almost completely faded like perfume on a cardigan discarded under the bed. I was reluctant to break up with Betty over the phone, but eventually Jules was able to convince me that breaking up with Betty over the phone was better than her coming back home and hearing from someone else that I had been cheating on her all summer. The day that I meant to call, I rode my skateboard past her house for nostalgia's sake. Like an onslaught of horrendous ludicrousy, I felt my breath escape from me as I stopped in front of her house. My deadly desire flooded me like a crack that had been broken open that consumed me once again. It was as if I had been pulled out of my state of oblivion and was looking into my memory's abyss once again. I suddenly felt as if I couldn't breathe. I had never stopped thinking about Betty, even though I had been sleeping with Jules. Jules now seemed unimportant, and all thought of breaking up with Betty felt like it would be the death of me. Betty was my reason to live, and without her, I knew that I would be nothing at all. Panic grasped at me as I realized that my infidelity could make me lose her. I closed my eyes as I tried to recall my nights and days with Jules. Had anyone seen us, or had we been careful? Could I pass it off as me being dumb and 17? Would she believe me that it was just a summer thing? Jules was my main concern. She knew that I was cheating on Betty with her, but there had been no discussion of what would happen once Betty returned and our senior year started. That night, she came over, and I could feel my stomach turning in knots as she walked into my room wearing Betty's signature cardigan. Where did you get that? I borrowed it the last time I was over. Don't you remember? Give it back! You know that that's Betty's. She looked at me with a telling sign of disgust as she shrugged it off. I thought that you said you were breaking up with her. Things changed. I don't get it, James. You seem so miserable with her, as if she were somehow controlling you. I like you, and I think that would be a good couple, but that's not why I'm saying this. I genuinely think that Betty makes you a bad person, and that you're better without her, even if you're not with me. It's like you're under her spell. I know you. You're too good for her. We make fun of Ines a lot, but she has this theory that Betty is a witch or something. You're just jealous. This thing with us was so stupid. We should have never done it. Jules didn't try to call or text again, and I was thankful for it. I spent the next few weeks thinking only of Betty, but she scarcely answered my messages and seemed distant when we did speak. It was through a mutual friend that I found out that she was having a birthday party the first weekend of the semester. She took 2 days to answer, and when she did, the text was brief. Show up if you want. It's at my house at 6 p.m. It will be in the garden. I was nervous to go to school on the first day. Betty had scarcely talked to me, and I was worried that she had somehow found out about my infidelity. We had homeroom together, And it wasn't as if she could avoid me. I brought chocolates and a handwritten note to explain everything, but on the first day of class, she was nowhere to be found. Eventually, I found out that she had switched her homeroom, and my heart dropped. There was no reason for her to have changed it, unless she was trying to avoid me. Her friend's death glare seemed to confirm my suspicions as the week progressed. I texted Jules to see if she knew anything, and she told me that Ines had spread a rumor that she had seen her wearing Betty's cardigan. I showed up to the party on Saturday unannounced, unsure of what would happen. Would Betty kiss me and show all of her stupid friends that she didn't believe the rumors? And would she lead me to the garden with everyone else? I feel nervous as I ring the doorbell. I feel a sudden wave of realization that after tonight, there would be no more dreaming of what would happen when I see her face again. I hold my breath as I agonizingly wait on the door to open, only for me to be greeted by another kid from our school. He offers me a drink that I hungrily consume, and then I have several more until I am unable to remember my own anxieties. Desperately, I begin searching for Betty and am delighted to see her on the bench swing in the garden. When I approach, her friends get up and leave so that we can be alone. She tells me that she heard the rumors from Ines, and she gazes into my eyes, trying to see the truth within them. I decide not to lie to her, and I catch myself telling her the whole story. She listens with a patient sorrow as I tell her how sorry I am and that I love her. She thanks me for being honest and then asks for me to leave so that she can think things over. She tells me that she knows that I love her and that she knows that I am hers, that I am completely under her control, and that she knew that I was the one that had hurt Tyler for her. Once I am back at home, I receive a text from Jules asking if she can come in. I tell her yes, glad for the opportunity for a distraction from my thoughts. But before I can stop her and tell her that I don't want anything physical, she's already on top of me, tugging and kissing at my lips and neck. I try to pull her off of me, and she just laughs and tells me to calm down. Something seems wrong. Her skin is cold, and she doesn't feel the same way as she has in the past. Her actions seem calculated and robotic, and not at all as graceful or seductive as I had known her to be. I shove her off of me and tell her to get off, but she's quick and soon proceeds with what she was doing. I feel her teeth sinking into my skin, and I can feel the blood draining from my face. Soon my body feels cold, and my eyes lull back as she whispers in my ear, "Betty made me do this. She said that me sticking my fangs into you and bleeding you dry was what we both deserve. I, like you, am powerless when it comes to her siren's will." Although she had been prescribed medication to help with her vivid hallucinations, she found that the side effects were more unpleasant and that she missed that part of her.
Her hallucinations were so much a part of her that the sudden absence made her feel as if she was no longer herself. The psychiatrist assured her that this feeling was normal and that eventually she would recognize her new frame of mind as her true self, but Cassie doubted that this was true. In fact, she hadn't even wanted to go to a psychiatrist initially. She had warmed up to the idea after a few sessions, and although it was nice to have someone talk to her about her visions, she found it frustrating that everyone seemed to think that she needed to go. She did not blame her dad for encouraging her to go and see someone. If she was a mother and had a daughter that had been a victim of a stalker, wouldn't she also want to make sure that she got the help that she needed? Perhaps if this decision had not been forced on her, then she wouldn't feel so conflicted. However, for now, the constant reminders and encouragement over her progress made her more angry than thankful. No one understood what she had been through, and she was tired of being controlled and feeling like a symptom that needed to be cured as opposed to just a person. Everyone seemed so fixated on the fact that she needed to be cured. The only time that she took her medicine was when the true nightmares began to form, when it felt as if a hand was slowly reaching towards her, if she could feel his breath upon her skin, or even see him in front of her, bloody with his body massacred. It had been a year since the incident with Charles. The circumstances that led to his death played like a loop in her head, tormenting her and telling her that it was all her fault. The only way to stop the constant racket was for her to pop 3 times the prescription amount along with a bit of liquid courage. She had been getting better, but after meeting Bren, the memories and the reminders had started getting worse. She wanted to blame the prescription, but she knew that it was not the real cause. There was just something about Bren that made her feel uneasy, even though she viewed him as a friend.
You should be dead.
She heard Bren say. I know, she whimpered.
You're possessed. You're a demon, and no one could ever care for you.
I know,
I hope he kills you for me.
said Bren, as his image dissipated into nothingness. She cried out to the image of Bren, telling it that it wasn't real. Bren wasn't Charles, and she needed to remember that. She felt frightened. She lived alone, and the house seemed too ominously empty. Although the image was gone, she could not shake the sensation that it would be too easy for Bren to enter her house and to stay lurking in the shadows, just as Charles had done. She pulled her knees to her chest and scanned the dark room, but no one was there. Her cell phone began to ring, and she welcomed the distraction. Oh, hey, August, she smiled.
Hey, Cass. I just wanted to call and make sure that you made it home safe.
Yeah, I sure did. Bren walked me home.
You sound nervous. Have you been taking your pills?
Yeah, I took it about an hour ago.
Is he there still?
No, he didn't come in. He kind of just stood back and made sure that I was able to get in.
He didn't walk you through your door?
He asked, concerned. No, I asked him not to, but he insisted on staying close until I was inside.
I don't trust him, Cass. Please tell me that you locked your doors.
I think I did. But I'm not sure. I'll go check. She got out of the bed and walked towards the front door. The deadbolt was in place, but she did not feel at ease. She opened the blinds and peeked outside. Bren was gone, and she sighed, a breath of relief. She put a pot on the stove and began making herself some chamomile. The hairs on the back of her neck began to stand on end. She went to double check the door, but it was still locked. "You're okay," she reminded herself. "Although you live alone, you are perfectly safe. August is just a phone call away. You are safe. There is nothing to worry about. Charles is dead, and Bren is a friend." A robust laugh broke the silence. Without thinking, she grabbed the steaming kettle and threw it in the direction of the laughter. Hot water scorched her feet, but at least the laughter had subsided. "I didn't need tea, after all," she said as she popped another pill. No space had ever felt safe. Past memories often tore through her conscious state, leaving her in a constant state of fear, reminding her that she was vulnerable and never truly safe. Once again, the hairs on her neck stood on their end. "Just show yourself! I know you're here!" she yelled into the black oblivion of her home. Silence greeted her in return. Her paranoia was in full swing, and she knew that something was off. She walked to check her back door and noticed that it was wide open. She tried to close the door, but the lock set had been taken off completely. She picked up her phone, ready to call the police, but paused at a text message from August.
Hey, Cass, I'm worried about you. Let me know when you're going to sleep, please. You didn't sound okay on the phone earlier.
She should have called the police, but instead, she called him. "August, hey, can you come over? I'm scared. My back door has been forced open and I don't know what to do." She headed back to the kitchen to grab a knife. As she walked, she could hear the back door violently shaking behind her. The roaring tempest outside had knocked out the power, and she could feel her anxiety getting worse. She used the flashlight on the phone as she slowly creeped towards the kitchen. Shadows dashed across the mirror as the robust laughter from earlier echoed down the halls. She turned the corner into the living room, and she found Bryn sitting on her couch.
Hey, Cassie, were you looking for a knife?
He asked as he gently stroked the blade of one in his hands. His aura was crimson. She had never seen that color before. Slowly, his head turned to the side while his teeth flashed a knowing grin.
I heard you scream, Cassie. It's not good for a young woman, especially one that looks like you, to be alone.
A new voice interrupted his dialogue.
Cass! Cass! Let me in, Cass!
She ran to the back door, ignoring Bren in order to open it. But the door, that had just been opened a few minutes ago, was stuck closed. "Come to the front! I'll unlock it!" When she ran back to the living room, Bren was gone. She yanked the door open and let August into the house.
Cass, are you okay? Have you called the police? Why are you in the dark? Let's get some lights on, okay?
They won't turn on.
Where's your breaker box? I'll go check it.
I really don't know, she stammered. She followed him as he searched the house, but they had no luck.
It's probably outside. Do you mind if I go out the back door and look? It doesn't seem like anyone's here.
You can, but it's broken, remember?
Everything seemed fine to me. I didn't see the broken lock from the outside like you said it would be, but I'll look at it again.
They approached the door and saw that it had been sealed closed.
Cass, do you ever use this door?
He asked.
It looks like it's stuck in its casing. There's no way that this door could open.
What? She asked, confused. Hadn't she just seen that the lock had been tampered with an hour ago? Yeah, I forgot. I had someone do that when I first moved in, as a safety measure. I sort of forgot.
It's okay. You're crazy, you know? If you wanted me to come over and stay the night, you could have just asked. I've been hinting that I liked you all summer. You didn't have to come up with some elaborate ploy.
The breaker was outside, and August was able to turn the lights back on to the house. He searched one last time and came back to where she had been sitting in the living room.
No one's here. The only abnormality was that your bathroom window was open, but that was likely a result of the storm. It knocked over a vase, and there's water all over the floor. I cleaned it up and made sure that the window was properly latched so that it won't happen again. Let's go ahead and get into bed, okay?
As they lay in bed, she wrapped her arms tightly against his exposed chest. For once, she felt safe. She felt it within his embrace. She knew that he would protect her. The next morning, she woke up and saw that she had several new messages and missed calls from Bren asking her why she never responded. He said that he was worried about her and that he wasn't sure if he could come over. She sent a quick text back explaining that August had come over and that she was sorry that she had made him worried, but that she was okay.
That's not really an excuse, Cassie.
He responded. I'm sorry, okay? I forgot. Don't be so mad at me, Bren.
I'm coming over. We need to talk.
Can we talk later? August is still here. I don't want to bother him.
I'm already here, Cassie. Let me in.
She walked to the living room and once again found him sitting on her couch.
I never left yesterday. I've been worried about you. I walked in through the back door after hearing you scream. I grabbed this knife to protect you. You shouldn't be alone. Come sit next to me.
She sat down.
Can I hold you?
He asked her. Bren, this is really weird. Plus, I'm here with August.
No one is here, Cassie. It's only ever been the two of us.
I'm gonna go check on him. As she walked back into the room, all she could see was an empty bed. Had their night together really only been a dream? She turned back to face the entrance of the room. Bren was standing there watching her, as if she was some misfortunate creature to be pitied.
Cassie, I have something to tell you.
Okay, she sighed, motioning for him to come sit on the bed and feeling nervous about whatever it was that he could possibly say to her.
Are you sure?
He asked in excitement. It's just a place to sit. You seem like you have something serious to say, and I'd rather be at eye level.
Okay. Look, I really don't know how to say this, but I don't think that you should live alone anymore. I would like to move in.
I've lived alone for years, she said, taken aback.
Cassie, you have a problem, and I'm really concerned for you. Someone needs to be here to protect you from intruders and, more importantly, from yourself. When I spend the night on your couch, I often find you in a trance-like state, walking around the house and murmuring to yourself. Your eyes are wide open, and you appear to be awake, but when I try to shake you
She
out of
took
it,
another
you
pill
never
as he
respond and
continued to
continue
speak.
doing what you're doing. You mumble about how people are coming to get you. When you do look in my direction and acknowledge me, you say that you know that August wants to kill you and that it's only a matter of time. I like you, Cassie. I want you to live with me. I want to protect you, to be with you, and to keep you safe. I don't like August coming over. I don't trust him, and you clearly don't trust him either. I hate that he lives so close to you.
Bryn, she hesitated. I thought that I made it obvious that I like August.
I know what you've said, but he doesn't like you, Cassie. He's only using you. We talked last night while you were sleeping, and he said that if you two did get together, that he would only be in it for the sex.
She glared at him. She wasn't sure what to believe, but at that moment, she needed him away from her, and she told him so. Instead of leaving, he came closer to her, with his arms outstretched. She felt claustrophobic as memories of Charles began to swim to the surface of her active consciousness. She shoved him away from her. Get off of me!
Are you going to kill me if I touch you? You killed Charles, but you won't be able to kill me, Cassie. I'll protect you from yourself. Demon be gone. Leave her body alone. She won't be killing anyone else.
His aura was crimson. She woke up, sweating feverishly.
Cass, babe. Cass, please, I'm here.
August whispered as he pulled her close to him.
It was only a nightmare. Have some of your medicine and go to sleep.
August handed her her pill bottle, and she took one of her pills, noticing uneasily that the contents were growing thin. August kissed her on her forehead and pulled her back into his arms. She listened to August as he fell back asleep. Although she had taken a pill, she could not help but to still feel shaken by her dream. Normally, she would check the corners of her house before drifting back to sleep. This action calmed her down, but tonight her eyes found Bryn with his crimson aura holding her knife in the corner of her room. His head was cocked to the side, and he had a large grin upon his face. She ran back to the bed and held tightly onto August until sleep finally took her over. August and Cassie began dating after that night, and she decided to not tell August the source of her nightmare. When he asked, she feigned ignorance and said that she couldn't remember. She still saw Bryn in the corners of her house, and although she knew that it was all a hallucination, she still found it increasingly difficult to talk to Bryn. It wasn't fair to her to dismiss Bryn. It wasn't as if he had actually done anything, and he also wasn't the only one that she saw. She also often saw Charles lying bloody in her bed and her younger self staring at the body of her attacker before disappearing behind a mirror. Compared to Charles, Bryn was significantly less disturbing. August could tell that she was bothered by her strained relationship with Bryn.
I'm going to be gone for a week for my work conference. While I'm gone, it might be good for you to mend your relationship with him. I think me being gone might make it easier for you both.
She made plans to go out for drinks with Bryn a few days later. His aura was blue, and he picked her up from her house.
Hey, Cassie. I'm sorry, but I forgot my wallet at the apartment and need to go back.
He insisted that she come inside as he opened the door and let her walk in first. He grabbed his wallet and made for the door before stopping in front of it.
Cassie, I have to tell you something. I want you to live with me. I want to keep you safe. I don't trust August, and I hate that he lives so close to you. I took the liberty of gathering clothes your size, your favorite beauty products, and anything else that you might need.
Bren, I don't want that. I like August. I'm dating August.
Cassie, he's a stalker. He sneaks into your house through your bathroom window, and he lurks inside.
Excuse me?
He's a stalker.
What I want to know is why you're saying that. And because you knowing my clothing size and what makeup I wear almost makes you sound like a stalker.
Cassie, I've loved you since I first met you.
You've never been invited inside of my house. How do you know I have a window in my bathroom?
Cassie, you aren't listening. I see him go into your house every night.
Yeah, Bryn, we're dating.
He doesn't like you. I can tell. I stay hidden in your corners and have watched him. I will protect you from him. He's only using you.
You broke into my house?
We had a conversation. He said that he's only using you for the sex, and that he's planning on breaking up with you. I, on the other hand, have loved you for weeks.
I've only known you for a month.
You'll be safe with me. I won't use you. I will actually love you.
She ran to the bathroom and locked the door, determined to call the police. This can't be another Charles intrusion. It can't. The vents were loud, and she thought that she would be safe. But in the bathtub, she found something that disturbed her. There was blood all over it and on the bathroom floor. A message was there for her to read, smeared in blood on the wall. Cass, get. Whatever else it said was completely illegible, as it made lines down the wall as if whoever was writing it fell and lost their balance while writing. Cassie crashed to the ground, trembling as the bathroom door handle began to move. She could not find the voice to scream, not that she thought that it would have mattered. She could sense her own blood draining from her face as her whole body trembled violently. Why is this happening? What is happening? She thought out loud. She grabbed her pill bottle, but it was empty. How long had it been since she had taken her medicine last? She tried to remember, but the blood on the floor was swirling sickeningly around her. Bren opened the door. His aura was a deep crimson.
It's a lot of blood, isn't it? I hadn't expected it, but he was good practice. If you refuse to love me, then I will kill you. How could you date him, Cass? You knew that I loved you.
She closed her eyes and wished for it to all go away. She found her voice and finally let out a scream.
No one can hear you, Cassandra. Finally, the demons that possess you will be dead. I am your remedy. She never stopped screaming through the whole ordeal. I don't think she saw me kill Bryn, and I'm honestly glad that she didn't. The last thing that Cassie needed was any more images of death floating around in that brain of hers. I'm just glad that she seems okay.
Do you have any comments on the roofies found in Bren's apartment? The officer asked.
I thought he was creepy, but I didn't have a full grasp of the reality of the situation at the time. If I would have known that he had been drugging her, then I would have warned her not to see him.
How about her LSD usage?
No comment.
How did you end up at Brent's that night?
I sort of staged the event. Bryn recognized his faces extremely well, and he had remembered Cassandra's from the news story surrounding her killing her past abuser. I always found him to be creepy, and I warned him not to pursue her. He never listened, and so I knew that I would have to make my relationship with her be something known to him. I broke the back door that she had someone weld closed and then killed the lights at her house. Bryn knew that Cassie was prone to panic attacks at night time and to stay nearby until she told him that she was okay. After he dropped her off, I told Cassie not to trust Bryn and to lock her doors. After killing the lights, I let out my best evil laugh to make it known to her that someone was in the house. Bryn heard her scream and tried to call her, but she didn't answer. As I had hoped, she thought that her paranoia was setting in, and that's when she called me, and I came over to save the day. Bryn caught on and tried to warn her about me, but she shoved him away. I slipped into her bed once she had fallen asleep, and I let her know that it was all a nightmare. Bryn caught on and went into Prince Saves the Princess mode. He called me to talk about his feelings for her, and he didn't respond well to the idea of us dating. Duong was working at his family's food stall on the day that Cam stopped by. Her honey-brown eyes startled him and took him by surprise. So shocked was he that she was there that it took a moment for him to realize that she was truly even there. Stammering, he asked her if she had any questions. Not about your menu, she blushed. What question do you have, then? He asked with a rush of nervous excitement. His face was flushed and he felt clammy. He hoped against all odds that she would not notice the miasma of desperation that was surely exuding from his pores. Well, she said, there's about 20 pho stalls on this road alone. Tell me, what makes yours so special? Duong thought for a moment before he responded. He would say anything to keep this woman at his stall. Well, since you asked, there is a special dish that is unlike anything you've ever had before. Really, she teased, squeezing his arm ever so gently as her intrigued eyes asked him to go make it for her. He searched until he found his father's secret stash. He prayed for mercy as he quickly made a batch. Tell me if you like it. It's a back-of-the-house secret, but I think that you're well worth sharing it with. She took a bite and made a face. It's sort of grainy. Is it supposed to be like that? I should have warned you. It's not the taste that matters, but it's what it does for your body. There's enough to last all week. Eat it each day for dinner, and then let me know what happens. Will it make me lose weight? You'll just have to wait and see. Remember, have one bowl a night for a week and make sure that you order it from me. To Duong's surprise, the plan worked, and Cam came by the stall each day that week. Through her visits, he got to know her a bit better, and she him. They had a lot in common, and he looked forward to each of her visits. On day 8, she gave him a call, and she sounded so happy that she was on the verge of squealing. It worked, Duong! I've lost some of my stubborn weight. Duong was surprised by what she said, but he rationalized the reasoning. It's common for one to achieve a goal when they think that they are actively doing something for their body. They tend to do other activities that will promote the process as well. Dwang thought that Cam already looked amazing, and he felt certain that she would not ask for more. On day 9, his mom called him from the shop. "There's a gaggle of girls here, and they all want your special soup. What did you make them?" Dwang panicked and hung up the phone. He thought of Cam and her delight. His father had told him about the secret ingredient, but he had doubted that it would work. Soup was supposed to be a secret between Cam and him, and now that the Pho King's secret was out in the open, he was worried about what would happen next. Would Cam stop talking to him if he disappointed her friends? He assumed the answer was yes. If he wanted any real chance with Cam, then turning down her friends would be a terrible way of ensuring a relationship. Why did she have to tell anyone? There's no way that this stuff worked. Plus, the supply was running thin. The phone rang again. "Yes, Mom, I know what they're after. Tell them to come back tomorrow. The recipe will be ready then." Dwang traveled to the beach and gathered bags of sand. This will do as a proper placebo, he told himself, and went forward with his plan. Dwang could not believe his luck. The business was booming because of the special recipe, and his relationship with Cam had started to bloom as well. When day 17 came around, he was eager to see what would happen. During a lull at work, he decided to call Cam's home phone, but no one answered. He drove by her house after work and knocked, and still there was no answer. The door was slightly ajar. Worried about her, he pushed the door open and called out for her. "Cam, it's me. Are you home?" A muffled voice answered from the kitchen, and he ran towards the sound. Cam had fallen over. Her body was weak and pale. "I need more of the soup," she begged. With a gulp, Dwang promised her that he would go get her some. He drove back to the shop and reached for the jar, prying the lid off of the urn. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered to the ashes. "I don't know what I've done." After a few days, Cam was back to normal, but time was running out. Cam's body had become dependent on the soup made from his late dad's ashes. A diet gone wrong. Who could he kill next for a decent soup?
Shiloh had worked at the same office for years, and she had begun developing casual relationships with the people that she passed in the halls. The conversations were always brief, but they offered a small level of comfort to her that added to her overall desire to stay at the otherwise monotonous job. Of the people that she spoke to the most, she was most friendly towards the members of the custodial staff, who she thought to be the most underpaid and the hardest workers. For them, she was overly nice and extremely sympathetic. When Tomas was assigned to the area that she worked at, she thought nothing of it at first. He was an older, quiet man that had simply smiled at her when he grabbed the trash from her cubicle, and then he would leave without saying a word. Eventually, the man began speaking to her, and Shiloh was delighted. They would chat primarily about simple things: the weather, the day of the week in relation to the weekend, and general how do you do's. The conversations were short, but Shiloh could sense that he wanted to share more with her. She began opening up the conversation a bit more in order to encourage the conversation, and she would make a point to ask him about his interests, be it in movies, books, and shows. and about what he did over the weekend. Tomas never really gave her an answer. He would keep it short and would instead change the subject of the conversation to her, urging her to say more about herself and to allow him to get to know more about her. She didn't think much about it at first and assumed that he just did not like talking about himself to her, which was fine and understandable. But as weeks went by, the questions started to make her feel uneasy. Instead of asking her about television or about movies, or anything else simple for that matter, he began asking her very probing and personal questions about her relationships, who she lived with, and if she ever felt unsafe at night. Shiloh was an overly honest person, and she told him that she was single, that she lived alone, and that she lived in a relatively safe neighborhood where she didn't really feel nervous at home alone. He then asked her where she lived, and she gave him an answer, but she couldn't help but to feel a bit uneasy giving him this information. He began lingering in her office for longer periods of time, and he refused to leave, even when she told him that she needed to get back to work. A male employee began to even notice how strange his behavior was, and began coming to her cubicle intentionally each time that Tomas would enter the room. Andrew, her coworker, stayed in her cubicle for as long as Tomas stayed in the area. One time he even stayed as long as an hour before Tomas finally left. They weren't sure if Tomas understood the hint being presented to him, and Shiloh began to feel a sense of paranoia and unease over the entire situation. She eventually began leaving the cubicle to go to the restroom or to get coffee around the time that Tomas would typically come around to pick up trash. Noticing this behavior, Tomas changed the time of day that he came by, and he did it with such sporadicness that it was hard for Shiloh to guarantee that she would miss him. On Valentine's Day, she came in to work to find a note scribbled on her whiteboard that read, "You will be mine, Valentine." There was no signature, but she knew it was him. She confronted him about it, but he refused to state that he had written it. A few weeks later, when she went on vacation, he texted her to see why she had left him. He asked her questions about who drove her to the airport because he knew that she didn't drive herself since the car was still in the driveway. When she didn't respond, he threatened to break into her house using her spare key that she kept hidden in her garden. Shiloh had never given him this information, and she began to freak out. She texted him back to state that he needed to leave her alone and that she'd report him to the police if her camera saw him break in. He didn't respond for a while, and just when she was starting to feel at ease, her coworker Andrew, now her boyfriend, who had driven her to the airport, called her over a text message that he had received from Tomas. It was a photo of him lying in her bed masturbating. In the caption, he wrote, said, "You may get to drive her to the airport, but I'm the one in her bed." How he knew that Shiloh did not have security cameras and where she kept her key, she never found out. Andrew had called the police to report a breaking and entering, but there was no trace left behind. Shiloh didn't know what to do. She tried to report the incident to Tomas's boss, but he said that although he felt for her, Tomas was no longer his responsibility, as he had not shown up for work and that he had been fired accordingly. Andrew helped her set up cameras, and she never saw Tomas again. But the thought of him in her bed stuck with her until she eventually had to move states. Amongst the tales from Argentina, the one that intrigued Daniela the most was one that she came across while working on her master's thesis in anthropological studies. Her family was from Buenos Aires originally, and she felt called to study their lore as an attempt to connect with her ancestors. Naturally, Daniela knew that most folklore was mostly used for storytelling purposes, and that the tales were mostly fictitious. But she also knew that at least some part of it originated from truth. She fantasized about going to her familial home, eating its food, and talking to the natives, all while searching for the truth in the myth. She dreamed of it so often that she eventually manifested her wish and was given an opportunity to go there for research purposes. If anything could make the trip better for her, it was Sam. Sam was one of her fellow researchers, and he had agreed to travel with her. Daniela doubted that Sam knew the legend as well as she did, if he knew anything at all. The origins were on the internet for anyone to find, but one had to speak Spanish in order to truly navigate the story. He confirmed this for her as they sat in the Dallas airport during their layover, mentioning to her that she would have to do all of the translating for him. Satisfied, she kept her knowledge to herself and only gave him the bare minimum amount of information to keep him intrigued. The rumor, she told him, was that if one were to eat the fruit of a particular tree at a certain time of the year, and then to fast for 6 days after consumption, that they would gain some sort of superhuman ability. He was satisfied and intrigued enough by her slight retelling that he did not ask her for any further questions. He assured her that the legend was all hers to research. He wasn't sure that he wanted to gain any superhuman ability, although he did think that gaining one sounded fascinating in theory. They laughed and joked and pondered about what a supernatural ability would do for them in their lives, while debating if they would reveal the power to anyone, or if they would keep it strictly between themselves. By the time that their plane landed in Buenos Aires, Sam and Daniela were both feeling particularly in good spirits about each other, and he even let her know that the point of the trip for him was to spend more time getting to know her. Daniela was pleased that Sam was showing interest in her. She liked Sam enough, but to her, his interest in her was a tool for her to gain immortality. For what she omitted of the rumor was that in order to gain immortality, a woman would have to chew the fruit and smear the mush daily on their sexual organ and have sex with the spread on her so that a child would develop in the womb. Whoever ate the placenta would be granted immortality. Sam and Daniela made the trek through the forest and up the mountains to the site where the tree was supposed to grow. During their trek, they bonded that much more over their mutual love for history and the adrenaline rush from their many missed calls while hiking. Much to both of their surprise, they found the tree and it was bearing fruit. In their excitement, they embraced, allowing their sexual tension that had been growing to allow them to make love where they stood. If the rumors were true, then she was excited that Sam would be the father. If the rumors were not true, then she knew that she was on birth control and that it shouldn't matter. She grabbed enough fruit to perform the ritual and was able to convince a naive Sam that the yellow stickiness was natural for her. 9 months later, she had a friend pose as a doula, and when it came time for delivery, Daniela insisted on being alone and away from Sam. What came out of her room was a beautiful boy that was more beautiful than any other child that either Daniela or Solma had ever seen, which made the whole affair that much more tragic when they found out that the umbilical cord had strangled the newborn to death. Next came the placenta. The placenta filled the room with such a repugnant odor that both of the women had to cover their nose. The placenta was a ghastly green color, and it was covered with boils. Solma begged her not to eat it, but in a manic state perpetuated by the death of the child, she forced the thing into her mouth, desperate to complete the task and to not let the child's death be in vain. Solma cried for Sam, but it was too late. Daniela's body went into a violent fit, and she was dead before she ever made it to the hospital. Sam researched the case of the strange fruit in determination to discover what had happened. After confirming with Salma, he became disheartened and violently ill. He could not believe that he had allowed Daniela to eat of the fruit and that he had not realized what she was doing. His guilt tore at him as he realized his own guilt in Daniela's death until eventually he went mad.